Hey Thomas, so we're gonna go and look at a few movements today, but first and foremost, when I copy and paste this link into and when I go to this link, this is what comes up. So we have to make sure that, and then like versus, let's say I go to another client's link, I copy their training log, and it ends up taking me to their training log. So you want your link to look more like this and not this here. Like I think we had an issue with how you share it. Keep in mind, to share a link, all we have to do is save the link, and then to send it, all we have to do is go to your email, new message, attach a link, browse, go to the name we're looking for. So if you're in your case, it might be my training, but go to the name we're looking for, double click it, and send it. That's all we have to do. So just keep that in mind moving forward, because I'd really like to see your data entry. I'd really like to see the kind of numbers that you're using, but unfortunately I couldn't for this week because that link does not work. So keep in mind, all we have to do is save our changes and then attach it to an email that we're sending to somebody, or in this case, in your training log, at the bottom, there'll be an area saying attach your training log here, and all you have to do is go through that same process, but attach it there. Instead of trying to copy and paste it and anything else, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Right below this on your training log is an area that literally says attach your training log here. So go ahead and just attach your training log there. We only have to put our videos in the is there anything else you'd like to talk about portion of our lift, or of our training log update. Now, looking at your videos here, this we did have access to. So we'll go ahead and look at some of these. All right, so a few things I want to talk about here. First and foremost, the whole idea that the whole thing what we're trying to do with our deadlift setup is we're trying to create tension. You will not see. We don't want to do the rollback technique. The rollback technique might work for somebody that's 7 feet tall, like Brian Shaw, who's an absolute monster. The rollback technique does not work for most people, nor should it work, because we're trying to, in the beginning of our deadlift, we're trying to depress our scapula, create lat tension. We're trying to build tension on the barbell. We're trying to go through all these subtle nuances that are very hard to go through on the barbell as we're setting up. But if we roll it back like that, it kind of takes away from our ability to do so. You won't see many good lifters out there that are like normal people, pulling conventional, that do the rollback technique. It's just not something you'll find very often unless you're 7 feet tall Brian Shaw or something like that, who's obviously a very big exception. But yeah, we want to go ahead and ditch the rollback technique first. We want to just go ahead and start with that barbell against your shins. Let's go ahead and create tension the best we can before lifting off the ground, and ditch that rollback technique. That's only going to do us harm. We're not going to be able to engage our lats. We're not going to be able to really set up to our best ability. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is going to be cervical spine extension. So when it comes to your lift here, we don't want to be cranking on our cervical spine this much. When you go to lift, it's okay to have a little bit of cervical spine extension, cervical spine being this upper portion of our spine, but I don't want it to be massive, because there's many different studies that show this, where if I go through a massive extension of my cervical spine, which is the spine that runs up my neck, it actually takes away from my ability to fire certain musculature downstream. We don't want to do that. It's only going to cause us issues in terms of our ability to produce power. So I want to change your deadlift setup from doing this big rollback technique that we're currently doing, where we roll it back and then we go here, to starting with the barbell on our shins, setting our breathing and bracing mechanics, building tension, and just coming up from there with a neutral cervical spine position, neutral head position. Head position stays neutral as my body hinges. So if I hinge, my cervical spine staying neutral looks like this. I don't want to be here. Okay? So these are going to be the two biggest areas for improvement for now within your conventional deadlift. Bench press, the very first thing we need to do is change your starting position in terms of your grip. Right now, your grip is by far the biggest thing that's preventing us from handling very much load. So if you ever see your elbows look like this as you're bench pressing, that there, we already can tell immediately. We can tell we're not going to be able to produce much force. Okay, so when it comes to pressing exercises, a stacked position is paramount. Okay, so if I'm going through a bench press motion here, I want to be stacked throughout the entirety of my bench press. I never want to be here. Trying to produce force with my elbows way the hell out here, not going to be a good position. This isn't going to allow me to transfer or generate nearly as much force as this position does, okay? So we're chasing a stacked position. The issue right now is, though, that you have such a close grip on the barbell, an unbelievably close grip on the barbell, that you're not allowed, you literally can't get in a stacked position. Because if you tucked enough to actually get in a stacked position, your elbows would be on top of your chest. So we have to, first off, let's widen out that grip quite a bit. And it's going to be great for long-term development, too. I'm going to warn you right now, it's not going to be fantastic feeling at first, but at the same time, it's going to be great for long-term development. So looking at this here, we definitely got to go quite a bit wider. In terms of the exact width, I would go ahead and start about 3 to 4, probably 4 finger widths wider. So this finger width, just go all 4 fingers on the barbell wider. Okay, let's go ahead and start there. That's going to be a great start and start mastering those positions. I promise you it's going to be a better investment in terms of your ability to handle load and do so safely long term. But on top of that, for now, it's going to help you achieve much more stacked positions and therefore handle heavier weight once your body adapts to it. Now, next thing I want to talk about here is I don't know like the exact because unfortunately I didn't get your numbers this last week, but I don't know exactly what like rep set this was or anything like that. But we got to keep in mind that you'll remember I talked about going light in the first week, so that's for a very specific reason. Oftentimes, especially younger individuals, fuck themselves up for life by going way too heavy, way too soon within training blocks, within just general rep schemes. Like they just go way too heavy, way too soon, always trying to hit PRs. We got to understand that the biggest lesson you'll learn through lifting throughout time is that the ability to have discipline in the load that you choose, the ability to go lighter on certain periods of a training block, certain periods of a training block and certain sets and reps is the hardest ability to master. But once you master it, you will develop faster than anybody else around you that's still pushing things to the max all the time. So when it comes to a new training block, which you're in right now, you're in the first week or two of a new training block. When it comes to the first few weeks of a training block, your body's not used to that rep, any of those rep schemes. It's not used to those variations. It's not used to training like that. It's not used to that frequency. It's not used to anything about that training block. So everything's new to your body. So pushing it to a point where you're failing reps is a recipe for 2 things. 1, injury. 2, huge jumps and accumulative fatigue. The way we get stronger is by creating a certain degree of soreness, a certain degree of fatigue, a certain degree of muscle breakdown, but then your body overcomes it by making it so that it only gets to a certain degree. If it goes overboard, your body doesn't recover, therefore it doesn't get stronger. The whole philosophy of the harder is better, pushing it to the max all the time, that has led to more injuries and shit show of training philosophies than anything I can imagine. One of the biggest things that I've learned through getting coached by Kabuki, along with being a Kabuki coach myself, is that like I said, the ability to scale things properly across the time of a training block is the hardest skill to learn, but once you learn it, you will be the best lifter you could be. So my point I'm trying to get at right now is we definitely shouldn't be pushing weight right now at this point in a training block to a point of failing a rep. There's no way we should be failing reps right now. All of your sets, as you can see on your training log, should have had 2 to 3, 3 to 5 reps in reserve. And if we're failing reps, we're definitely nowhere near that. So let's really make sure, and if you do fail a rep every once in a while, not a big deal, but the idea of a training block here is training blocks are typically 4 to 6 weeks long. We'll say 5 weeks, nice median there. They're typically 5 weeks long. The first week we should be going light, because your body's not used to anything. Second week we go up a little bit harder because now your body's getting a little more used to it, and we got to go up in a cumulative load. Third week we go up a little bit higher, because your body's again starting to get used to it, and we have to go up and load from the previous week. Then higher, and then on the fifth week, we're doing things that are kind of putting ourselves at risk of failing because your body's adapted to it, because it's received some of the strength adaptations for these specific rep schemes, these specific variations. So by the 5th week, your body is ready to push things. In the first week or second week or even third week, It is not. It is not even close to being ready. Pushing it too early is the number one reason people get injured, the number one reason people don't experience strength adaptations at the proper rate. So we have to know, like, first week, 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks, not the time to push it to a point of failing reps. We should have those 3 to 5 reps in reserve or higher the first week or two. So your body's just getting used to it. And again, at this point in our training, in our training right now, we're focusing on movement quality more than anything. So we definitely shouldn't be anywhere close to a point of failing reps. So this is really a point I want to get across here more than anything, is that we shouldn't be anywhere near failing reps. Your ability to get stronger, gain muscle, and just get better as a lifter, along with avoiding injury, is going to get a lot better if we really learn how to scale things properly. And the last thing worth noting there is if we fail the first week, we fail reps the first week, the whole idea of progressive overload goes out the window. This is a 5-week training block. So if we fail reps on the first week, where are we going to go in the second week? You failed the first week. So we have nowhere to go in the second week because the progressive overload is going up in load on a week-to-week basis. So if you bench 300 pounds in the first week of a train block for 3 sets of 5, let's say, the next week for those same 3 sets of 5, we got to be at least 320. Otherwise, your body doesn't go into progressive overload. Therefore, it can't adapt to anything. Then the third week, we'll go 330. Fourth week, we'll go 350. And then last week, we go 360, and we even fail a rep on that last 5th week. And that's okay on the 5th week, okay? But that's the kind of idea that we're trying to do. We're trying to slowly go into progressive overload on a week-to-week basis, slowly increase load on a week-to-week basis, and that's how you get a hell of a lot stronger. That's how all the greatest athletes around here do it. That's how Chris Duffin does it. That's how myself does it. That's how all the really, really good athletes do it. But again, if we push things to a point of failing the first week, where are you going to go the second week? We don't have an opportunity to go up into progressive overload at that point. So these are all the things, I know I'm kind of going on a rant here, but these are all the things that we really need to understand as soon as possible to get the most out of this training and avoid injury, okay? All right, so looking at the squat here, so the biggest thing, so like I said, this first block, the best way to get stronger for you is going to be getting as good movement quality as possible. Better. The more we can work on movement quality, the better you're going to get, the sooner. Okay, so with that being said, with the squat, we have some pretty big things to work on. So I'm going to go into a lot of explanation here. And if you have any questions on this, please let me know, because it's very important that we get this to the fullest ability. So when we squat, the last thing we want is spine deviations. Spine deviations are typically extension or flexion in the lumbar spine. So what that looks like is this. So I'm getting ready to squat, and this happens. This is extension, okay? So extension is death. We do not want extension, okay? The reason why we don't want extension is because when that happens, every muscle length-tension relationship, every length-tension relationship of every muscle downstream, so in all of our leg musculature, changes in a detrimental fashion. So when you go into extension, for example, your hamstrings are lengthened, your quads are shortened, and all of the muscle downstream changes in that fashion. So when it changes like that, it can't produce force nearly as well. So now your hamstrings aren't working as well, your glutes aren't working as well, nothing's working as well. These primary movers, the things that you are depending on to grind out heavy weight or just move weight in general, aren't working well because they're being pulled in weird directions, and it's also putting them at a massive risk of injury the second we do this, okay? So again, that's lumbar extension, last thing we want. Now, the reason this typically happens is there's a few different reasons that lumbar extension typically takes place within a lifter. One, hinging mechanics isn't very good. So what hinging mechanics are the ability to move your upper body and your hips in a even manner, or in a good rhythm, you could say. So for example, if my chest doesn't come down as I squat, this is what happens. If my hips go back, my chest doesn't come down, I go into extension. If my chest gets pulled down, if I have my chest fold down with good hinge mechanics, no extension. Extension doesn't happen anymore. So the number one reason that people go into lumbar extension is because they refuse to let their upper body go down. They try to stay super upright with their upper body. So then this happens. And again, when this happens, length-tension relationship change. I get put at higher risk of injury, but that's not even all. Also, my ability to brace at my midsection goes to hell the second I go into extension. I lose my ability to brace too. And bracing controls like 12 other things in a squat. So when we have spine deviations, it's concerning, and it's a number one thing we have to get rid of as soon as possible to be a better athlete, to handle heavier load, and to decrease risk of injury. Okay? Now, another reason, I just talked about hinging mechanics. That's one of the reasons that extension typically happens, but also because of poor breathing patterns. So when somebody breathes like this, that is more than likely going to cause lumbar extension. Now, the reason that breathing like that is so wrong is because when I breathe like this, I'm vertically moving, and I am passively lengthening my abdominal musculature. Similar to when you go into extension, your hamstrings get lengthened and they can't produce force as well. When your abdominals are lengthened, when they're passively lengthened, because I breathe like this, my abdominals are passively lengthened and they cannot brace. They cannot brace nearly as well because we breathe like this. Also, you've likely heard of intra-abdominal pressure, IAP. When we breathe and brace, we're trying to create as much IAP as possible. Intra-abdominal pressure is everything to stabilize our spine and do a million other things that bracing is connected to. Okay? So the whole idea behind IAP is that I'm filling up with air like so. I create this belly, and then I brace down on it, okay? That's intra-abdominal pressure. That's everything of intra-abdominal pressure. But when I breathe incorrectly, when I breathe like this, no air goes down here. There's nothing that happens here. Therefore, I definitely can't brace properly because I have no IAP, and my musculature and my abdominals can't function well because they're passively lengthened. So the two biggest reasons that lumbar extension takes place are poor breathing, particularly chest breathing, and poor hinge mechanics, okay? These are the two reasons that lumbar extension happens. And these are the two things that we have to work on, because looking at your squat right now, this is something that we really got to work on, is because watch this part of your spine as you go to squat. That's extension. So that's lumbar extension. So the second this happens, now your hamstrings are lengthened, your quads are shortened, all the musculature, the small musculature, the piriformis, the this, the that, all the TFL, all the small musculature in your hips change length tension, everything downstream. Every muscle you can name, change length tension relationship to where it can't function well. So again, that's just one thing. Also, your ability to brace isn't there anymore. So you're going to extension right now in your squat. So we have to work on two things: your hinge mechanics and your breathing. Right now to breathe, you're doing this. Very vertical. We have to get rid of that, okay? I would rather you not breathe at all and just brace muscularly than breathe in a vertical breathing pattern. We gotta avoid that. It's the number one thing we have to avoid, okay? So as you breathe, let's watch this once more. Watch you breathe. Okay, watch our breathing mechanics here. So that was us breathing. You can see it. It was so vertical that the barbell even moved. So we went like this. The barbell even moved because it was so vertical. So we have to get rid of that. We have to turn this into this. Just like that. We're filling with air in proper diaphragmatic breathing. Like you're filling a pitcher of water from the bottom up. The biggest thing you have to do, though, is that breathing, you'll notice the best squatters in the world, the people that are squatting ridiculous weights for their weight class, they all breathe nice and slow. We got to sip the oxygen out of the air. Breathing quickly always turns into shitty mechanics, okay? We have to think about it like we're sipping the oxygen out of the air. And if I have 700 pounds on my back, I'm definitely not going to do this. Instead, I'm going to go here. Squat, okay? Nice, slow, sip the oxygen out of the air. That way there's no chance we passively lengthen our abdominals, okay? So that's the biggest thing I want you to work on for next week is sipping the oxygen out of the air, slowing down your breathing, okay? The second thing I want you to focus on is not going through these hip mechanics. I don't know what to call it, but I do see it every once in a while on newer lifters. where you're starting in this position, and then right as you breathe, you're doing this. And then you squat. So we're shooting our hips in right before we squat, and that's causing us to go into extension. So if we watch it one more time, you'll notice that we're having these hip mechanics that kind of shoot in and shoot out as we're getting ready to squat. So look at your hips right there. We're shooting in right there. So that shooting in you just did, that's going to lead to some issues there. So we have to get rid of that hips in mechanics that we currently have. Okay, so we got to get rid of that. Let's go ahead and breathe and brace from just a perfectly still neutral position. I unrack it, I walk it out. I'm going to breathe and brace from a stacked neutral position. We're not going to be here and breathe with our hips in. Instead, let's just breathe from a neutral spine position, nice and stacked. I'm going to breathe just like this. And then hinge mechanics. Hinge mechanics are going to be the most important part of this. As you go to squat down, we don't want to be here. Have that upper body come down. The upper body has to come down at the same rate my hips go back. I have to be here. This is our hinge mechanics. This is how we squat, okay? We don't want to be here. So let's have that chest. Let's go nice and slow on the eccentric of your squat. Nice and slow. And it's really focused on chest coming forward as hips go back. And then we have perfect squat mechanics from there. No lumbar extension. These are the biggest things I want to work on in your squat. I know I went on a bit of a rant there, but this is going to be really important stuff. Lastly, just like your deadlift, we can't let our head go like this. We don't want to let extension happen. Okay, looking at the ceiling, that cue that used to be given out a lot is a cue that we really don't like because, again, that causes changes in length tension relationship, that causes issues. We want to keep this head neutral, okay? So as I hinge, this head is going to stay neutral. As I come up from my squat, the head is going to stay neutral. I don't want to be here, okay? So don't let that head extend like that. And that's going to be the last note I have for you for this week.